Hello everyone. Soon we'll start. Let me share the link to the stream and we'll go. I hope you had a good kind of rest for a little break for 1 week. And again, we will move on to the next chapter. Okay, cool, post it. I can continue. No, not VS. This is VS Code, that's right. I was writing a wiki, but we will do this in Visual Studio, of course. And we'll start completely from zero. I don't even need this. Don't save anything. Okay, let me delete this as well. Perfect. Fresh start. So today is actually quite a big thing. We're starting a brand new topic, and this is a massive one. And it's actually quite interesting because there's a lot to tell. So today we will talk about RESTful APIs, about HTTP, about how do you transfer data through the internet, what protocols do we use, and how to not so, difficult, in a not so difficult way, how do you execute those HTTP requests? What is an HTTP in the first place? And why should you care about it all? Why does it matter? And how is that helpful? So let's get started. And I'll start from the next problem. As promised, every week we will be facing a new problem. Nice one. I will fix the link, but the problem, come on, problem. Definitely there is a problem. Maybe this one? Nope. I'll open it through VS Code because I don't know why it's not opening. Online shopping list. This is the one. Okay, your online shopping list is the problem. Okay, sorry for confusion. Not this one. It's an empty page. Okay, interesting. Super interesting. Okay, doesn't matter. Anyways, the problem is this. Let's. Can I zoom it in? Full screen? Maybe not. Doesn't matter. The problem is this. We will be making our own shopping list. And our shopping list will contain a list of items that we want to buy. Their prices, their names, the amount that we want to buy. And a shopping list will contain a total. And that's pretty much it. And also a shop from which we buy stuff. So it's a super simple application that we'll be making. But the key point this time will be that we are actually making it accessible through a browser, and we'll be making a web service instead of a console application. So those are the cool things about this. So again, we will be making a very simple shopping list API, which allows us to add items to the shopping list, and the shopping list itself will have how much money was spent when you bought all those items in the shopping list, the total, I mean, the shop name, where you bought all that stuff, and the address of it. also identifiers for everything. So yeah, it will have all the methods needed for a shop and a validation on top. So for the shopping list, sorry. So that's very simple, and that's what we'll be making. First, about what you should be doing now. For now, just relax and listen. When we move on to something necessary, I'll show what you need to open, and you should be able to follow through with me. So don't worry about that. When the time comes, you will, get into it, no problem. If I'm being too fast or too slow, again, write plus plus. Write plus plus if you would like me to go faster. Minus minus if you would like me to go slower. So I know the tempo that I should follow. All right. So HTTP. What is HTTP? It's if you look in Wikipedia, HTTP, it says it's a hypertext transfer protocol. If I just Google that up and hit Wikipedia, it says it's a hypertext transfer protocol. And then it says it's an application layer. And things like that are not so important to know, as all you have to know is that that's how the internet bases its stuff on top. Like everything that happens in the browser uses HTTP. So let me illustrate it with an example. If I hit F12, it will open a developer console. And if I hit network, it will show me what is going on. So let me try to refresh this page. And you see a whole bunch of stuff just happened in a single refresh of a page. So what you see here, probably the most important bit is this part right here. Maybe not. Sorry, it's this part. The initiator is not as important. I don't even know what that is. This is fine, this is fine, and this is fine. So the cool thing about this, it shows in what sequence did requests happen. And basically, if I hover over a request, so this list of things is a list of HTTP requests. This is what happened when I refreshed the page, or rather when I went to this wiki page. So if we look closely what's happening, it says, so you try to access English Wikipedia and you try to look for hypertext transfer protocol page. And you can see how long it took, and you can see that it responded with status code 200, which means it succeeded. And if you look closely, everything here is 200, 200, 200. It means everything succeeded. So when I went to this page, it retrieved a whole bunch of other resources like script files, like got the actual content of the page, content of pictures, everything around this page that's needed for it, it got it through this bunch of HTTP requests. And it shows the content, the kind of content the request retrieved, and how long it took, and how big it is. So that's pretty cool. And that's HTTP. So here you're seeing, I guess, responses, because these are response status codes. The request itself is made under, and we don't really see if how we actually call this thing. We don't really see that here, but we see a bunch of responses, how the what the browser received after calling something. So the missing part here is we don't know how this request was made or this request was made. But the answer to those questions is that each URL, which is here, is when you make an HTTP request, you are sending a URL with maybe a body, maybe some headers, maybe, or not maybe, but always with an HTTP verb. So when I'm going here, I'm actually sending an HTTP GET request because I'm trying to get the contents of this web page. And it worked just like that because this is a public page. There is no authorization required. I don't need anything really. It just works. But usually the requests are more complex and you need more stuff. What happens if no HTTP verb is specified? Well, that's the thing. You cannot even send an HTTP request without a verb. You have to specify it. In ASP.NET Core, in C#, the API, it's made this way that you cannot not send an HTTP verb, a post, a get, a patch, a put, a delete, without specifying. You cannot send an HTTP request without specifying those things. So it's really important. Right. And, you know, the standard today is to have web services which are RESTful, or in other ways which communicate through JSON as responses and requests. And a lot to take into, so let me basically take you to a list of public APIs. And this here is a really nice list of public APIs. It's in a wiki as well. And there is not movie reviews, but book reviews, movie reviews, something like that. Yeah, New York Times books. There is a cool API here which we could use. And we'll go to get started. No, we won't get this. We'll go to APIs and we'll go to movie reviews. And doesn't really show much. Sorry, I'll go to another one. It will be easier to understand. Public APIs. Sentimental analysis. There's one, sentient, this one. So this API basically allows us to do sentimental analysis. And this is a RESTful API. And what that means is this is the URL I have to send, and this is the body I have to send, and this body is called a JSON. JSON because it has these brackets, and each field for this JSON, the value, the field and the value are separated by a colon, and that's the notation of a JSON. I'm going through a lot of stuff, but we'll go back to it soon, slowly, as I give a more hands-on example. So if I click on this, you see there is a response that's pretty poorly formatted, but whatever. Anyways, if I click on this sentiment, you can see what request was called and what it resulted to. So it takes this block of text and it splits it into sentences, and each sentence has a sentimental value, how positive or negative it is. The point is not the sentiments, the point is how the responses, requests are being returned. And you can see it returns in this weird format, both here and there. So I sent text in this weird format and it came back in this weird format. And this weird format is called JSON. And soon we will delve deeper into it. So let's go to Postman. Please open Postman right now. It's a free to download application, free to download, free to use. When you do some more advanced stuff, it will grow more difficult and some features will be paid, like team collaboration. But for personal use, it will suffice. And it's a pretty good tool for a lot of stuff. So first of all, it might look overwhelming. But when you open it, all you have to do is to create a new workspace. So I created a new workspace. I select it's a personal workspace, and I called this home, and I created it. Since I have it, I'll click cancel. And inside this workspace, I have two requests. And the request we will be making now, I'll delete this one so that we make this together. Sorry, I didn't want to create a new collection. Let me delete it. What you should do, you should click a plus here to create a new collection for yourself. I already have one. Just name it testing third party or whatever you want. I will delete this one because I already have mine. And click on those three dots in this collection and click add request. This will add a new request to this collection. So a workspace is like a solution in .NET, and a collection is like a project in .NET. That's the equivalent in Postman. And each collection can have multiple requests, or you could say CS files in C# terms. So I will create a request, and I will name this request get sentimental value. I will simply follow the instructions that are given to me in this API. How to use this API? They say send a post request. So I go to my Postman and I select the verb, and these are all the HTTP verbs you can select from. Get for getting stuff, post for creating stuff or sending complex queries, put for updating stuff when you replace all the values of the payload with all the values, where you replace all the values of the old thing with the values of a payload. Patch when you just take a little bit of an existing object and replace a part of it. Delete stuff. Copy head, options link, unlink, purge, lock, unlock, probe, find, view. Those aren't really, I don't really use them, any of them. So just the first 5 is the ones that you should care about. All right, so we're using get, HTTP get, and they said to use this link. So I'm using this link as they're saying. Sorry, I will give you the link to this as well if you want to follow through this simple stuff. So use in Postman post as a verb, this link. These headers are added by default, kind of, and now you need to select the body. So click on the body part, body tab, and select raw. When you select raw, you're given an option to select the format of this raw payload. So I'm selecting JSON and I'm pasting this. I'll format this a bit nicer. And what is JSON really? Again, it's just very simple. These curly braces, they identify an object, and this identifies a property, and this identifies that property's value. For example, I could continue, and this would be my other text, my other property, or I could contain another object within this JSON object with its own property. So in JSON, I can, kind of have another JSON because it's just an object. And if I want many objects, I can have them as well as easily. And this is how you would have them. So I'm basically saying by using a comma, I separate different properties. By using curly braces, I say it's an object. And finally, by putting those square brackets, I say that this is an array. An array can have multiple things. Maybe not objects necessarily, but things for sure. So this is an array with 2 empty strings, for example. Again, I don't need any of that. I just have my payload that looks like this. So I'm sending text over to this API. So how does this read really? It says, again, I needed to choose post. It says, so go to this URL using this method. So send a post request to Sentium API herokuapp.com and send this body to their API. Let's do that. I hit send and I get a result back. Let's move this over here. So my result contains a status code of 200, and it's nicely explained what it means. It means success. My request succeeded. My request succeeded, and I got data back, just what I expected. So it both gives me a summary of all that I've written and analyzes each sentence by sentence. So let's try to write something, more meaningful to see how this works. Okay, this seems promising. Maybe it will even work. How does my sentiment sound like to you? Please tell me it's fine. Please. Let's see. So overall, it says it's positive. Please apparently is neutral. That's interesting. But yeah, you can see what this does. And again, maybe for now, this might look like a weird format for you, but in time, it will be good. Yusuf said his request or her request failed. Could you say what error did you get? And we'll figure out the solution to the problem. So again, reading this JSON object, we can see this is the response object. This is the result object, which has a polarity of 0.23. And no quotes means that this is a number and it has a type positive. And then there is an array of sentences. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences, and each sentence is an object of its own. So Yusuf said that they got 405 method not allowed. So let me reproduce what you have. I'll select a get and send this. And look what I have, 405 method not allowed. And if you read the message query, it says, you are trying to send a request which does not correspond to the method, to HTTP verb that is required. So instead of a get, select a post, and it should work. If you do that, you should get the response back. Let me know if it worked. Yeah, no problem. And literally, you responded with OK. And that indicates something very similar that, you know, a browser would respond, or sorry, an API would respond. It's OK. 200. Good. So this is a very simple API, and why is it so simple? Because it doesn't really have anything. It's the whole API is just one request, so it's not a very interesting one. And actually, it's not a great representation of what typical APIs are like. So let's try to look at a different kind of API. But before that, Yusuf has another problem. It's 500. Internal server error. Let's try to reproduce that. So if I messed the JSON up, it's bad request. So it just says that my JSON is invalid. So it cannot even process the request. It's bad. And let's try a different thing. For example, let's select text instead of a JSON, and let's send that here. So if I'm sending a different kind of format than it's expected, it will also malfunction. For example, in this case, the API is expecting a JSON, but I'm sending a text media type, and it's not able to process it, or rather it doesn't even try to process it because it doesn't understand. So try to make sure that this is JSON and then send, and it should work. It's raw and it's JSON, and yet it still doesn't work. Let's try to send more stuff and see if it works or not. Experiment with this API. Oops. It works. So you can see you can send more stuff than is needed. or you can say, or you can send no stuff at all as well. Yeah, so make sure this is text as well and not text1 like I had, and it should be fine. There is literally no other things that can happen. There are no other mistakes that you can make, so not that many options to choose from. Lastly, it's worth looking at headers, a thing that is actually auto-generated for us. Postman is a nice tool because it actually does a lot for us under the hood. What did it do? So first, it automatically generates the host and the content length. So it basically takes this thing and content length thing. Sorry, it takes the content, which is this thing, this whole thing, and it calculates how long the content is. So it calculates for us. Most APIs do that. Most clients that are able to send requests do that. So it's no biggie. It also takes a host, which is this thing basically. So it takes adds this in a header as well. Then it adds user agent, basically a header to identify what called this, what's calling this API. So Postman is calling this API. Then it specified an accept header, or rather, it specifies basically that this thing, this server, it can accept any kind of formats of data. So I'm not sure if it's for the server or for the client. The accept header is added to tell the server that Postman can understand. Yeah, so it tells about what a client can accept back from the server, and content type. So basically content type and accept are the exactly same headers, but for different purposes. The values are matching. For example, if I'm accepting only JSON and I'm sending JSON, then these values will be the same. So that's the similarity between the two. Content type is what I tell to the server that I sent, and accept is what I tell to myself that I can read back from the server. And accept the encoding is the compression type, and connection, it means that if I make a connection with a server, I will keep it alive until I close myself. So I don't randomly terminate my connections, but rather keep them alive. I can specify a value closed, which would mean that I create a new connection per every request. So that's HTTP headers. By default, like by themselves, they don't really do anything. But the purpose of them is to provide metadata for both client and server about what they are for, what the request is for. So as you can see, they can be used to identify who is calling the server, what data formats are being expected and accepted, what's the compression types, what's like, do you want to make a new connection or do you want to use an existing connection? So that's the purpose of HTTP headers. They're just metadata to identify what's the purpose of a request or response. So let's summarize what we know so far. We know that this is an HTTP request. This whole thing is an HTTP request. And we will send this HTTP request to this URL. basically a link which identifies an endpoint, a place which can be called from through HTTP, through the web. And post, along with get, put, patch, delete, are HTTP methods, or in other words, HTTP verbs. And this whole thing is an HTTP message, content, body, you name it. And this is a JSON, and it holds payload or content for this request, HTTP request. So we send a request to Sentium API. We send the post request because we have a body, a bit complex query. Maybe the string is too long to fit in this URL, so we chose to use body instead. And when we send this request, we get a response back. 200 indicates success. And lastly, we have a response body, which looks like this, which is again just another JSON. And we have, request headers, and then we have response headers. So pretty cool stuff, pretty simple stuff. As I mentioned, such API is not very common. It's very simple, and it's rare for an API to just serve one request. So let's delve into a more complex API, shall we? I will delete this, and I will go back to this movie reviews API. For now, just follow along with me because you have to create an account here. So obviously not everyone wants to create an account, and I didn't say to do so in advance, but it doesn't really add anything extra other than 1 or 2 bits, which you can learn by simply observing. So, movie reviews API. It basically says that we can get movie reviews using these endpoints, or rather this full endpoint. And let's do that. I will go create a new request, and I'll call this request get movie critics. Cool. And I paste this, but I don't need this part. Query, I don't need. It's a get request this time because it says so. It says get, as you can see here. Okay. And that's all for now. If I run this as simple as that, you'll see I will get an error. And this time it's not 500, it's not 400, it's 401. So this error, it says unauthorized, and it says similar to 403 forbidden, but specifically for use when authentication is possible, but has failed or not yet provided. The response must include www authenticate header field containing a challenge applicable to the requested resource. Basically, it means that this request is protected, and the only way to access it, sorry, not the request, but the endpoint is protected, and the only way to access it is by sending some means to say, look, I have a key, let me through. in this specific API, you can get a key by going to, I think, apps, click on your link, click apps. But again, this is specific knowledge for this thing. Then just name this app to something and hit create. All those enables, they don't matter. Why am I showing this? I'm showing this because other public APIs, they probably won't want people to, access their endpoints out of control. And through API keys, you can identify individual people or organizations that are accessing your API. So if someone is accessing it too much, you can throttle them or completely block them. If someone is accessing it when it's paid, you can charge them, So API key is used to control how much and who can access your API. It's not the best mechanism when it comes to actual security that you would want for your customers to have. You don't want customers to access each other's data, and that is a completely different mechanism. But for something as simple as this, it suffices. API key suffices. Later on, we'll learn different mechanisms, how to implement them, but for now, that's enough. So we have our app already created, and this is what I'm doing here, a bad practice, which is I'm literally exposing my API keys. If this was something I cared about, probably 5 seconds later, this already would be leaked and people would exploit the thing that I'm calling. But in my case, I'll call this for the next 5 minutes. So I don't really care. And yeah, you basically shouldn't expose those publicly. You should secure them. How can you secure them? So for the purpose of this lesson, one way to secure them is by creating a Postman environment. Environments. Here we go. Create environment. I'll call this local. And let me add the value. And let's call this value API key. So then I take this value, go back to my request. And now let's add this request to, let's use that key, that API key that I added inside the request of Get Movie Critics. So I go to Authorization tab and I select API key from the drop down below. And in my API key, instead of this, I will use a variable. This one. And I should be able to use an environment local. Still unresolved. Maybe I didn't save. I think I didn't save, yeah. API key. It should now show API key. Here we go. So again, go to environments, create your environment, click the link or click the plus, and inside here, enter API key and enter this one. It's still not secure, not very secure, but at least given I have already entered this and just demonstrating how to call this request, you will see API key instead of the actual value. You probably can select it and mark it as secret. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. For serious applications, you would store those for development purposes in environmental variables, in here, basically. And for actual production purposes, you would use some kind of a public key vault, like Azure Key Vault or some other. I don't actually know any other Key Vault service, just that one. So that's the idea. So we have our API key, and in here I type API key in the key field. And note that capitalization matters. It really does. It has to be exactly non-capital because it's a query parameter. And then just send this to this API. So a get in this place with this API key. I'll actually paste everything because you can definitely reproduce this. So a get request to there, and the API key I'll paste as well because I don't care. And if I hit send, it takes a while, but it comes back with 200 OK after 1 second and 300 milliseconds with book reviews or movie reviews, book reviews, right? Again, data that came out in a shape of a JSON. Why am I showing you this? Why is it any different than others? Well, because you see, this is a more RESTful kind of approach. It's not the greatest kind of approach, to be honest, but it demonstrates 2 points. One, that some APIs need a security header or some token, some key that you pass to the request, and others they don't. This one specifically also is interesting because you see you have movies, and then you go and take reviewers of movies specifically, and this is almost but not quite looking like a RESTful service. And what do I mean by a RESTful service? Let me add a request and try to sketch something. So a RESTful service would be something like my server slash and my server.com, let's say, slash, I call this people. Excuse me. I call this people, and let's say this would return all people. If I type /1, this would return person by ID 1. If I type pets, this would return person by ID 1, but only that person's pets. And if I type diseases, maybe 1, maybe Timmy, and then diseases, it would return the diseases of Timmy, but only if it's a pet of a person with ID 1. So you see how RESTful is being shaped? It's like you have resources that have relations, and then you basically call those resources and go deeper, 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 deeper. If it's a relation, or you just go, pets all together and just get pets instead of going to a person and getting its pets. It's like different ways of getting different resources, but having an ability to get related resources of another resource by going deeper in the URL path. So it's very similar to how you navigate files. You have this similar hierarchy. So that's how REST is based. It shares that similarity as well. RESTful by itself means representational state transfer, but that is a very technical term. In a nutshell, you could just say that RESTful is for having a web service which is able to take and return JSON. That's pretty much my understanding of RESTful. There's a lot more detail than that, but if you explain about RESTful to a random person or a programmer and just say JSON, and that'll be pretty much enough. They'll understand. All right. So we know essentially what an HTTP, what happens when you make a call to a website. We already witnessed that with, our documentation page, other pages. We can see a whole bunch of requests happening, right? And now it's time to make our own RESTful API. Once again, what is RESTful? It is basically a type of web service which works with JSON. It's not the essence of it, but that's how most people in a nutshell understand it. And if you have this understanding, you'll be fine. A web service that works with JSON, that's REST. A web service that works with XML, that's SOAP. Doesn't have to be that way, but usually is that way, and I haven't seen a practical example that isn't that way, so stick with it and you'll be fine. And now let's create our own web service in ASP.NET Core. So I'll go open an empty solution and I'll click Add New Project. Before we do that, simply check out Lesson 5 Web API or create a new solution through Visual Studio. Whatever you want, either way is fine. And inside that empty solution, hit Add New Project. We will be creating a web application. And this template actually offers a different kind of web applications. But the web application we're going for is a web API. We'll call this application Shopping List API. And let's hit Create. It now asks us to select a type of application. And we will be making an API specifically, not a web application, because we don't want client access. We won't be making MVC as well. We won't be making Angular, React. We'll simply be making API, web API. No need to check anything extra other than HTTPS, though it's optional, and hit Create. You'll notice that it comes, with a little tutorial, like you can check the documentation, read about it and stuff. But what is important here is what we have in the solution. For now, it gives us this weather forecast class, which let's delete it. We don't need that. And next, it gives us weather forecast controller. Also, let's delete everything except the controller part. instead of weather forecast controller, let's rename this to shopping list controller. And do the same to a file. You can rename by hitting rename or just by clicking once and then clicking twice until it becomes editable. And I just took this, copied, and pasted it there. Okay. So this is a controller. And now an actual part that's no longer theory. So what does each of these things do? So these guys are called attributes. Attributes don't do anything by default, by themselves. They're very much like headers. They just give metadata on a class, and someone somehow will process this metadata and give extra behavior to this class. So what extra behavior does each attribute add? API controller just gives a bunch of API functionality to this, something that the ASP.NET Core framework requires for this to be a functional controller. And route attribute actually, based on this route, allows us to discover this controller, its methods, the endpoints that it has through this route. And I can modify this route, and actually a RESTful way of doing this route would be writing API and then /controller. API/controller means that this is an API, and specifically it's shopping list controller. So I will be able to identify this controller by using the path shopping list controller, API/shopping list controller, like this. The controller part is removed from the endpoint. And API controller, this is an attribute. It adds metadata to a class, as I said. Something somewhere will read this attribute and apply extra logic to the class. Discoverable endpoint, this endpoint. Okay. And ControllerBase further gives us functionality that is actually very visible and not as hidden and silent as API controller. It's called inheritance. We take methods. We take methods from ControllerBase, and now we are able to use them. Methods and state. Yeah. And that's it. That's what a controller in essence is made of. So let's create a few endpoints. First, let's create an endpoint for creating something. So public, for now, I will write void, but that's not really how it should be, but we'll come back to this. And I'll call this create. I'm not specifying what I'm creating because from a context, since it's shopping list controller, obviously I'm creating a shopping list, so I don't need to specify anything. And then I type shopping list. I don't have this class. I cannot create it yet. So I will create a new class called shopping list. I'll click on a project and hit add new item and then select class. And I'll call this shopping list. And again, what does my shopping list have? My shopping list has a shop name. These get and set things are called properties. You can use them. For now, let's not use them. We will figure out why are they useful, but soon, not today. Maybe in 2-3 weeks when we get to the OP part. For now, let's not use it. For now, let's just ignore them. So public string shop name. Next we have address. And then we have decimal total price for all the items, right? These 3 things we have, and it's great. And this is called a class. We already know that. But this is also called a class which has a state. And that state is not global. We can create objects from this class, just like very similar like we created HTTP requests with JSON. We will be able to create objects with this thing. But we won't be creating objects manually yet because shopping list. Why aren't you shopping list? Why aren't you understanding me? Shopping list, shopping list. Controllers, shopping list. Okay, maybe I need a using statement. Okay, maybe it's bugged. Let's build. It succeeded, but it's still red. Sometimes I truly hate Visual Studio for doing this. Let me restart it quickly. That's what Visual Studio does sometimes. It ignores the fact that you have correct stuff. So bear with it. See, now it works. Like I literally didn't do anything, but it works. So whatever. Basically, I have a shopping list. We want to create a shopping list. For now, we don't care. For now, we just want to see if we can interact with this method, if we can actually do something with HTTP to be able to call this method. So let's hit Control F5. It says, would you like to trust the IS Express SSL certificate? And I'll answer, yes, I would. Yes, please. This installs an SSL certificate, which basically means that I can use HTTPS. What I really care about is not this endpoint, but my endpoint. And I said it's /API/shopping list. This is my endpoint. And if I hit enter now, it says, hey, unsupported media type. There is no method that corresponds to this request, right? Let's actually call this from our Postman suit. So I'll create a new collection. I'll call this collection shopping list. And inside this collection, I'll add a request, and I'll call this request create shopping list. And I'll paste the URL here, and I'll select post because we want to create something. Post is used for when you have a body in your request, and when you want to create things, when you want to add something, when you want to do something which has significant side effects, like doing the same post multiple times, you will be creating duplicates. For example, if I send the same shopping list as a post body, I'll be creating multiple duplicate shopping lists. Okay. So, the same drill, select JSON. Let's look at our shopping list, and I'll just copy paste it in here and see how much of an object this will make soon. You see, we don't have types in JSON. We don't have types in JSON, so I just remove those. We don't have types, so I remove those. We don't have semicolon. We have column. And the values, hypermarket, just making random values up. Total price 100.77. And comma for each value. And don't forget quotes for JSON properties, because that's the syntax. And therefore, if I do a send again, I will click disable SSL verification because it's my local machine, my local service. I trust it. I'll send again. And, well, it actually worked, which is unexpected, but it worked. Let's continue with another method. Let's do a get, which will get all shopping lists. Before we do the get method, let's finish implementing the create method. Therefore, we need a place to store our shopping lists. There are many shopping lists, so I could create a shopping list array and call it shopping lists. I could do that, but there is something else that I will do. Up till this point, we knew that multiple values basically mean that you should use an array. But in C#, we notice that there is a problem, that values come and go from the array, and therefore we need to somehow expand and shrink it. Wouldn't it be nice if that was handled for us? And the answer is, of course it would. And we actually have a data structure that handles that for us. We have a list data structure. So a list is a generic data structure, and all that should mean to you that instead of writing that it's shopping list array, you basically write these brackets instead of these brackets by specifying that this is something that can hold many of those shopping lists. So a list is a thing to which we can add and remove things. And literally all we care about is that we add this shopping list to shopping lists. And I'll also call this static, and I'll also do a new. I will not explain for now why this is necessary, but just take my word for granted, this is necessary. I will explain why in two lessons, I think. 3 lessons maybe. For now, it's too much for 1 lesson. So we have our controller, which adds shopping lists. And we want to also get all the shopping lists which we have added. So I will have a method get, which returns all the shopping lists. So I simply return shopping lists. Here we go. Nothing special here. And I will run. Again, this doesn't matter. I just wanted to run it. And let's run this again. So I have a new request. So this is a post, and I'll create a get with exactly same URL, but a different HTTP verb. Instead of post, this is a get. And let's run this. And you can see it says the request matched multiple endpoints. Ooh, what does that mean? Well, actually, all this time I was doing this quite wrong. Instead of just having those methods without anything and just pretending that they can be accessed just like normal C# methods, I should have been a little bit more sophisticated. So I need to put attributes which reveal the verbs through which I can access these endpoints. So for a create, it will be HTTP post, and for a get, it will be HTTP get. And if I run again, now there is no more ambiguity because these methods actually matter. So if I do a get now, you can see I get an empty array. If I do a create now, it says okay. And if I do a get again, you can see I get something, but not quite. What is going on? Let's try to figure out a few things about HTTP. Before I proceed, let's create one more endpoint for getting a specific item. A specific shopping list, sorry. So we will be using a shopping list name, not a name, but what do we identify shopping list as? Shop name to get its shopping list. Let's add an ID to shopping list to identify it because we cannot really identify shopping list at the moment. ID. Okay. We have a method to get a shopping list by ID. So we will look for a shopping list, which is null for starters. We'll run a for loop. There's a better way to do that, but we don't know it yet. We'll actually run a for each loop in shopping list. Yeah, sure. So if we're saying if list, and with list dot, we can access what that object has. So list dot, we say if a list has ID, the one that we are looking for, then that's the list that we are looking for. Is this list, right? Let's do this slightly different. Let's just return this list immediately. And what if we don't find this? We can always throw an exception, right? And saying shopping list by ID was not found, right? Let's run this again and see what happens. So let's create one more request. Let's say I want to find shopping list by D1, right? And it says shopping list by ID was not found. But wait a moment. Why is there so much stuff? The whole stack trace is returned and I have internal server error. That's not quite nice. Well, in reality, when you have problems that you actually expect and can control, in controllers, you avoid throwing exceptions like this because there is a better way to handle it. Remember when I said that inheriting ControllerBase gives us stuff for an MVC for a controller specific thingies to do, that we inherit methods, we get access to methods that we didn't have access for. So back to the point. Inheriting ControllerBase unlocks access to methods which we didn't have access before, to Web API specific methods. And what I have in mind is methods like OK or not found. And actually, when you are trying to work with controllers, you will need to return a whole different set of HTTP status codes. Sometimes a request succeeded, so we return OK. Sometimes a request failed for different reasons. Maybe a user was unauthorized. Oops. So you can have an authorized right here. Maybe you didn't find a resource, like we here didn't find a resource. So you can return not found. Or maybe some other reason happened. But the problem with what we have now is we are returning shopping list. We're not returning a status code. And we need to do something with a return type to adjust it so that it returns what is expected. In other words, we need to adjust the return type so that it's not the resource that we're getting for necessarily, but a status code which optionally may have a resource or may not. In our case, or rather in all cases, as far as I know, in Web APIs, you should always return IActionResult. And this is a type which returns any status code. So in our case, instead of a list, we will be returning OK with a list inside it. And if it's not found, we'll return not found with this error message. So if I run this now and run the same request to get shopping list by ID, it says 404 not found. Shopping list by ID was not found, just like I expected. Let's fix all of those right now. So I return OK. And instead I return IActionResult. And here I return IActionResult as well. There is created, but created requires a URI, which I guess I could provide. So I could provide shopping list and then the object. And that's really it. Let's run. Let's test all of those. So this works as before. This returns 200 as before. And this should return 201, which indicates something was created. The problem, though, when I send this stuff, somehow this actually, didn't pick up anything. Why is this being sent results in empty stuff? Like, even if I try to get stuff, I get empty stuff. Would anyone like to guess what is the problem? What is the problem? Why are we getting empty stuff? Why is it not working as intended, though we actually did everything in our power? Or did we do everything in our power? Did we miss something crucial? Well, a hint that it works kind of, and that we do have an item in the list, is that the more times we call create shopping list, the more objects are added. So we do have this thing. That means we do have objects created, but the problem is with individual objects. It seems that whatever we create, we do create objects, but, and I'll show what I mean by my but. If we run this send request and check what shopping list is coming, you'll be surprised, because this shopping list has default values. None of those values are actually defined. And therefore, when I actually create something, it doesn't appear as created. It's just a JSON, an empty JSON, because nothing here is being used. It's just empty. So that's the key point why it isn't working. I actually am missing an ID as well. Okay. Why is it an empty JSON? We know a problem. It adds to a list, it persists it, but it's an empty JSON. And surprise, surprise, the JSON is not working because we are using, by default, System.Text.Json. I don't think it's there. No, it's not there. Yeah, we are using System.Text.Json. And let me show you what I mean. So System.Text.Json is a library that allows us to serialize objects. Yours works? I think yours might work for one simple reason. You might be using an older .NET Core. If you are using .NET Core 3.1, I'm not sure why yours works. It shouldn't. But I know a fix for this one. So a fix is System.Text.Json, the .NET Core native library, which takes this object and converts it into a JSON, a string. It needs to be exact. If I name these non-capital, it'll work. If I name these capital, it won't. So I need to be very explicit and specify their names. And for that attribute to work, I also need to add these now, unfortunately. So these are getter and setter methods, and these things turn. You use properties, that's right. Yeah, I probably don't need those either. Yeah, these are setter and getter properties. So yeah, that's probably why it didn't work. Yep. So that's why you should be using properties. Or if you don't want, you can use those attributes, but those attributes work on properties as well. So that's why we use properties. It's not because property is something very special and by itself it makes it work. It's because the framework has been designed this way to interact with properties and not fields. So under the hood, it picks up properties and not fields. Property is something that has those getter and setter methods like this. And it will serialize them specifically. Properties, I cannot talk about properties without talking about OOP. So for now, just add those mindlessly, and later on we'll explain why should public stuff be with properties. But for now, just add those mindlessly. And just know that this allows a getting and setting stuff, and we can mix getting and setting stuff. The controller method. So we have three endpoints: to create shopping lists, to get shopping lists that we have created, and to get a single shopping list by its ID. Let's test it. So you see we just got all shopping lists, and if I'm getting shopping list by ID 1, it works. If I get shopping list by ID 2, it's 404, not found. Shopping list by ID 2 was not found. If I create one more shopping list called supermarket, super duper, let's say, which is in, let's say, I don't know, I just made that up, and 111, and send. We just created another shopping list. If I hit get to get all shopping lists, you can see again that it was added to my list. So gradually we're building our API, we're able to access stuff, And it's quite simple. Let's continue. So summarizing what we just did, HTTP post allows using a post verb. HTTP verb. HTTP allows using. I did explain what is action result, but I will explain it again. So IActionResult allows different types of result to be returned. Specifically, it allows different status codes to be returned, not just okay. Okay, if we don't use IActionResult, we will be left with just two options. Either okay or either 200 or 500. With IActionResult, we can return any status code possible. So that's why we need IActionResult, so that we can return created, okay, or not found with the same return type. That's why you need IActionResult. Instead of, that's fine. Instead, so never return resource directly. Always return it through OK or similar. So using a get HTTP verb allows using a get HTTP verb. ID means that at the end of endpoint, we will is a custom route, a placeholder for the value that comes as an argument is what this is for. So basically the ID that I pass will take this placeholder's place and you append that to API/shopping list/ID of this thing. And you will get the value of it and routing of it like that. So there is that. Let's do one last thing. Let's create a list of items. And let's create, just call it items. And let's call this item. So a shopping item has a name. It has a price. It has also a amount. Does it have anything else? It does not. Kim Flory asked, what type is IActionResult? Well, IActionResult itself is a type, so that is the type. It just means that specific status codes, which are subtypes, are also, in hierarchy, that type too. It's like, there is an animal, and then there is dog and cat, which are also animals. So that's the same principle here. But about it, we'll talk more in 2 lessons. All right, so we have an item. And let's add one more method. And let's call it patch. So IActionResult, add item, HTTP patch. Again, similar pattern to the get. We'll pass ID of a shopping list. And we will send the item. So we want to find, once again, a shopping list. And this looks like we now need a method for finding it. So let's have private shopping list find shopping list by ID. So if I find it, I return that list. And if I don't find it, I return null. So now I can replace this with find shopping list. And if my shopping list is null, I return not found. Else, I return, okay, here is your shopping list. And here we do the same, literally the same. I just copy pasted that part. And when we have our shopping list, we can add items to it. So we add the item to the shopping list. There is one little problem though. It's not initialized. So by doing this, I basically create a list when items when the shopping list is created by doing this bit. Also, we'll go back in detail about this when we cover OP. So I performed the operation successfully, and I'll just return, okay, it was done. So let's test it out. So let's add one more request, which is add item to shopping list. Let's take the endpoint. Let's say we add item 1. And let's say we send it a JSON for an item. And again, I'll do the same principle. I'll take an item, its properties, paste it in the JSON, delete the types, add the quotes next to the property names, and give those property names proper values. Oof. So let's say we add what? We add bowling ball. And the price for that, I don't know the price of those, $39.99. One bowling ball. Let's try and see what happens when we send it. It says shopping list by D1 was not found. Makes sense. It was not found because we don't have it. So let's create a super duper supermarket. And you can see it has 0 items. And let's add this item to the super duper market. Right, I'm just doing a GET request, right? I was supposed to do a patch request. Sorry about that. So let's do patch. And it says, okay, it worked. So if I do get all shopping thingies, you can see my item was added in my items list. And if I do this again and again and again and again and again, you'll see that those items have been added multiple times. You know, that's a major difference between a post and a get. Sorry, between a post and a put and a patch. Basically, post, if you run post once, you will create duplicates. You will keep on creating things. If you run patch, you will also maybe, not necessarily, but maybe, I would say probably, be creating a part of an object different. Like in our case, we kept adding bowling balls. But if you had a put request, and let's create one final request to prove our point. So the same API, once again, but a put this time, and I'll call this update shopping list. Let's take a body. And let's do the magic once again. That's all. Let's call this Aldi Mall. Let's ignore everything else. Cool. And let's implement that endpoint in the controller. So once again, the same logic. You find stuff. This is the ID. This is the ID. This is the shopping list. You don't add item, you update shopping list itself, the whole shopping list. So I actually, sure, let's pass that ID. Okay, so found all shopping list. We don't need this. So if we found the shopping list, what do we do with it? We take the all shopping list and assign each of its properties to the new shopping list. Just like I'm doing right now. This is the essence of this method, basically. Is there updated? Nope. Modified? I don't know. Maybe there isn't a great status code, but that's basically what we'll do. So I literally just overwrote the old shopping list with the new shopping list. And I'll overwrite everything except the ID because it doesn't make sense. The ID will not change. So let's create a shopping list. Let's prove that that shopping list exists for we get all of them. And let's update the shopping list name. It might look, hey, we just update the name, right? And sorry, it's supposed to be put, not patch. Let's run again. The same routine, create, prove that it's created, everything works, and then update. And what we expect here is maybe just the name will change, right? So let's run it. But then look what happened. ID and name are the same as here, but everything else is null. Null, 0, empty. What happened? Well, when you call a put, you basically say put everything that is in this request to the existing resource. And that's the key difference between a patch. Actually, let's create a patch as well. Let's create a patch as well, but I cannot create a patch as well. Okay, I can create a patch as well. Let's do it. Update shopping list name. HTTP patch. ID is fine. Yeah. Let's say return, okay, old shopping list. Let's run again. It's not quite exact, but that's fine as well. Let's create a new request. Let's call it update shopping list name. Let's paste this and let's get it here. Let's run this. It doesn't work, obviously, because we didn't create a shopping list yet. Let's create a shopping list like we did here, and let's update its name with the usual, flow. And all the mall, we update a shopping list of ID 1 with the oldie mall, which didn't work for some reason. Because we are using a get, we are supposed to be using a patch. And actually, on top of a patch, we are supposed to be adding an endpoint. Not really great, to be honest. but sometimes people do it. You know, I'm adding this so there is a distinction between this and this, because at the moment there isn't a distinction. So we're saying we update name of this thing. And let's run this. It's 201 created. Let's get all. All are created. I didn't restart it, sorry. Let's restart it. Let's run this. Created. Let's got all of them, 200. And let's update just the name of a shopping list shop. Boom. And you can see it changed to all the mall as we specified here. So the difference between patch and put is that put overrides everything. So it just set these properties, but like whatever wasn't specified, it just resetted them. And this one, it will set these that I specify here in only the ones that I specified will update. So that's the key difference between the two. It won't do anything if I specify address because my endpoint doesn't take that, but I could update the function to accept that as well. Anyways, probably last method needed, which is delete. So let's take the endpoint, paste it, and let's say delete shopping list. So I don't need anything. I just need to delete. We have method not allowed because that method is yet to be implemented. So HTTP delete. Delete. All right. So we say find shopping list. If that shopping list is null, if that shopping list is null, I fixed this because there was logical error because we were checking the old shopping list, so that wasn't right. Anyways, this is also duplicate. I should definitely make amends, but I cannot think of any right now on the spot. So expect refactor in the next lesson. Anyways, so we find a shopping list. If shopping list is not found, there's nothing to delete, so it errors. But if it is found, we say, look, there's this shopping list. Could you please remove it from the list? So I say my shopping lists, and I remove the one that was found. Deleted, there is no such method, therefore I'll simply return OK. So if we run this once and get all once and then delete once, we get OK, we get all once again, and you can see there is an empty array. Let's run this a few times. You can see there are a bunch of shops. Let's run this twice. So out of 4 shops, there is only 2 left. Let's run this twice again. And out of all shops, you can see none are left. So our delete also works. So in this lesson, you basically learned the basics of RESTful Web API and that it's not really difficult. You learned what different HTTP verbs do. what a JSON is, and yeah, that's pretty good stuff. Let me continue. Verb, explanations, and please ask questions, and please let me know if you have big questions and need consultations. For I have half an hour to spare. Allows using patch HTTP verb. Patch updates a part of a resource. Post usually is used for creating new resources or running complex queries. Put allows using put HTTP verb. What does put do? It overrides resource with the new values. Patch, we already have that. Updates part of a resource. Allows deleting. Allows deleting. Deleting what? A resource. Sorry, not allows, but allows using HTTP verb for delete. Deletes resource. I don't want to introduce that term yet, so I won't say anything. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I had for this lesson. Once again, last shout if you have any questions. I think I explained everything. Yeah, I think I explained everything. This block of code bothers me, so I need to refactor it. How do I refactor it? Unbekannt asked, so put override all properties, patch override only the past properties. Yes, that's correct. Or not necessarily override. Sometimes, it's adding something, it's having side effects, just like post did. But the key difference is that it's for some of the object, and this is for the whole of the object. So that's the biggest difference. What can we do with this? Let me think. I cannot think of anything better. Sorry. We'll try to figure it out by the next lesson. So I'll commit this code and that'll be all. Shopping list web API. There's a wiki. Feel free to read it for more information. It has everything that I said and a bit more. There's a homework as well. I promise to add also questions to check if you learned the topic, because they are yet to be added, but soon they will be. So thank you very much for your time watching, and see you next time. Good night.